what are the things that you value and care about, and how can your money really show up for that, right? And I tell people this, show me your calendar and show me your bank statements, and I will show you what your priorities are. Because if you're
Mm.
out here telling me, like, oh, vacations with my family are so important to me, but you haven't taken a vacation with your family in 5 years, how important is it?
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it. And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma.
Hi, Lindsay. Nice to see you again.
Hi, nice to see you. I'm so happy to be back.
Yes, I'm so happy we can make this happen after the first time around. But yes, we're here, and because this is a very important topic, financial education. So before we get into it, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us about the work that you do.
Yeah, so I am Lindsay. I am a financial therapist. And so I have been licensed as a therapist for over 5 years now. And so I merge behavioral therapy with financial education. And so I like to not just put a band aid on things, right? I like to get to the root cause of really what's going on with, whether it's money mismanagement, debt, if you're avoiding things, whatever it is for you, and really peel back those layers to figure out what's going to work from you from an emotional, behavioral standpoint. Um, and change some of those habits that maybe, you have that might need a little work, and kind of get your money going in the direction that you want it to. So that's what I do.
Amen. And I like how you put the emphasis on therapist because it makes me think about the difference between like people can have knowledge. And this is something that I learned in my field as a nutritionist. Just because you teach somebody about, the health, how to build a healthy plate. And most people, especially by now at our age, we know what healthy food is and what unhealthy food is. But it's the therapy part that has to come into play because like I have to deal with their like emotional eating habits and myths and beliefs they had about food and talk a little bit about those band-aids, some of the issues that people have that lend them to needing financial therapy.
Yeah, no, totally. So, I mean, as you know, money is one of the most emotional, what money is one of the most emotional things out there, just like food, right? And there's actually a lot of parallels that can be made between how people are choosing to eat. And to your point, these stories that they've told themselves or these things that they've, really attached to. Like I hear women say all the time, I'm just really bad with money. Like, well, where did that come from? Why do you
Yeah.
feel that way? Was that something that was kind of a self-inflicted belief, or is there proof of that? Like, have you historically been really bad with money? And if so, why? What's going on there? And I think one of the things that people don't really understand, and I'm sure you see this in your work as well, is your parents or your previous environment is such a predictor of
Yeah.
what you're doing now, right? And so if your parents were really quote unquote bad with money, or they fought about money, or they overspent, or they, didn't save, or whatever it was, those habits are very likely stemming from your youth, because money habits are actually, there's two bodies of research on it. One says by 7 and one says by age 9 your money habits are established.
Mm.
And so understanding, again, where you came from with money is so important to understanding where you want to go and how to break some of those habits, because that is the beautiful thing in the work that I do, is there's so much hope because habits can be changed. And so we get to analyze that and do some of that work together. Yeah.
So how did you get to this point? Were you always, good with money, or did you think you were bad with money? How did you become a financial therapist?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. My parents actually used to fight about money all the time, like all the time. It actually ultimately led to their divorce. They really could never get on the same page with it. And so, because of all that conflict in my household, I actually kind of had the belief that money causes that conflict. Like money's bad, right? So I was more on the avoider side of it, just like I don't want to think about it. I don't want to, I don't want to go there. Um, and then, fast forward in my later adolescence, I ended up kind of moving in with a friend and her family, for other reasons, but just it was kind of a better spot for me. And so while I was in their house and their environment, it felt totally different. And they had money, they were very well off. And so I wasn't constantly tiptoeing around like, well, if I spill something, then how are we going to get it cleaned? Or how are we, like they were just like,
Mm.
we'll clean it or we'll get a new one. Or, like it didn't feel so like tight and restricted and scary all the time. And I took note of that and I thought, well, this is interesting, and her parents didn't like, they openly talked about money kind of just in front of all of us. Like it didn't really, her house was kind of the hangout house and that's where we all went. And I was like, this is a really interesting environment, and then my mindset started shifting to like, well, maybe actually money doesn't just unite people, but maybe it could, or excuse me, maybe money doesn't just divide people. Maybe it could actually unite people. Right. And so then I just kind of like, learned that and whatever. And so when my now husband and I got together, we approached money entirely different. His background was totally
It's
different. Yeah, his
always
parents,
like that opposite.
yeah. Oh, the opposites always find each
Yeah.
other and then they get married and they think it's like cute and like, like your quirky little like, oh, you're a saver. That's so cute. You don't spend money. And then all of a sudden you're like 5 years down the road and you're like, wait, but I want to spend money and now we're fighting about that. That sucks, So, um, but yeah. And so we really had the conversation relatively early on in our relationship, just like, let's use money as a tool and get on the same page. And so, we are very goal oriented. And so we're like, okay, what do we want to accomplish in our life together, in our partnership, with our family, as individuals in our partnership? And let's use money as a way to accomplish some of those goals. And so I just, I really took that to heart. And I think, health is the number one thing that people should really prioritize, but money is a very close second. And in fact, I'm like, well, money allows you to be a
Or-
little bit healthier. So
Yeah,
it's kind of like chicken or the egg, right? Is it money or is it health that's more, but they are very on a very equal playing field, I think. And so I think both of those things are really, really important to nourish, right?
likewise.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned like your parents, you thought that was the cause of their divorce. And this is, I don't know if I don't remember the statistic, maybe but like it's a high percentage of divorces that are usually caused by, finances and money fights and things like that.
Yeah. So the very first thing that is, the demise of a relationship is infidelity. Second to that is communication issues. And I'm like, that is the broadest topic
Yeah.
that like what does communication issues even mean? I know there's stats out there that say up to 40% of divorcees say that money, financial stress caused or was a contributing factor to their divorce. But I would argue actually I would anticipate that's quite low because, again, money touches every single decision that a person makes. And so if you
Right.
two are not on the same page with how you're spending, how you're saving, doing any of that, then that leads to communication issues. And I see this often with the couples that I work with is they're fighting about things, but actually the root cause and the issue is so much deeper than like the surface level thing. And I can actually give you an example of this. There's there's a couple that I've worked with and they were really arguing about the time differential in their house. Like she was very much taking on a lot of the labor that, household labor. And his argument was like, well, I'm working so hard because I'm trying to pay off our debt. And so I need to be at work and I need to be and his job was such that he was getting paid by the hour. So if he wasn't working, he wasn't getting paid. And so he was like, well, I'll just work more and more and more. And it was actually creating this huge division of labor that was unequal in their house because of how often he was gone working trying to pay off this debt. And she was home with the kids getting resentful and frustrated that she didn't feel like she had help and she couldn't hire a sitter to help, and so ultimately we needed to decide how do we want to get you out of that debt is that was actually the root issue was like we have different fundamental beliefs of like how we're splitting our time and how we can actually make our goals different and what does our spending habits look like to play a factor in this and so it's really nuanced.
Mm, yeah, I could see that. And for a couple that say they're not on the same page and they weren't like you and your husband where you guys like cleared that before you like in the beginning of your relationship, what are some steps that couples can take to get on the same page with their finances?
Yeah. So I think the very first thing is really having intentional time to look at your money together. Now, that doesn't have to be like this very first time you guys are going to sit together, you're going to like run through all your numbers. That's not at all what that looks like. Because, in fact, what I see often is every single time a couple is having a conversation about money, it's generally a fight. It's an argument, it's a disagreement, it's Amazon packages showing up at the door. And then the person just kind of fires off of, like, why are you still buying so much stuff? And the other person gets defensive, like, it's things for the kids or, whatever. Um, and so I don't want to start there. I actually want to start having a really positive conversation around money, which most people are like, that doesn't exist. Like, what is that? So, and what I did actually, this is quite a while ago now, but my husband really does not like the numbers. Like, it's not fun for him. He doesn't like digging into that. He'll do it, but he doesn't love it. Right. And so we had a really heavy numbers date one day. And then I said, next time we're not going to do that. Right. And so I just came up with a really fun activity. And I said, I actually went and got like scratch offs, like lottery ticket scratch offs. You do not have to do that. But I got like $30 worth of like scratch offs, whatever. And I told him a couple hours ahead of time, I said, we are going to do these scratch offs. We're going to pour each other a drink after the kids go to sleep. We didn't need to get a baby, nothing like that. It wasn't a big extravagant date at all, but it was intentional time for us to sit together. And I said, I want to talk about first, if we win $10,000, what would we do with that money? If we won $100,000, what would we do with that money? And if we won $1 million, what would that look like? What would we do with that? And so we did. He poured me my glass of wine. I poured him his bourbon, and we just talked about it. And we were very aligned on like the, $10,000, like we would probably, put some money in savings, invest some of it, do this, whatever. But in that conversation, we had talked about when we got to the $1 million thing, I was like, well, where would you go? Where's like the number one spot in the world that you would go? And he, of all the people in the world, who's like a big hunter, mountain man dude, told me he would want to go to Greece. And I was like, what? Like, I would have never guessed. And so it was so fun. And it was such like a connective conversation. And it was all about how money would get us to the point in life where of the things that we want to do together. Right. And we played our scratch offs and we won $0. But I'm like, that $30 that I spent on scratch offs was such a fun date. And it was one of the least expensive dates he and I have gone on because it wasn't a 5-star restaurant or something crazy. And that's where I want couples to start, is really just having a conversation about your goals, because money isn't the thing that we care about. I do not care about the number in your bank account. I care about what that number in the bank can do for you. And the higher that number is, the more you can do. It's all about having options, right? And so that's the very first place that people can start, is like addressing it with vulnerability, saying like, hey, I often notice that we're fighting about money. I play a role in that for sure, and taking, accountability. And that's not what I want to do anymore. Can we talk about just some of like what we want our life to look like, and maybe how money can help us get there? And that can be a really healthy place to start for couples who are not on the same page right now.
Yeah, I like that. And try to make it fun and light and not start with like, blaming the other partner and, then it's not going to go the way you want it to go. And I like the example of the scratch offs. Like, I know the point isn't the scratch offs, but it's like the point was trying to figure out if you have mutual goals or to see
Mhm.
what your partner's goals are. Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, it's so much more fun. And I think money should be fun. I think it should be a fun thing to say, like, "Oh, we're going to have a bonus at the end of the year. What do we want to do with it?" And that gets to be a fun conversation, not like a sad, negative, like, oh, you're going to spend this or I'm going to spend that, like that sucks. Who wants to do that?
And I know there's some couples that have like money dates. Do you have this with your husband? Do you do it like a weekly or a monthly thing?
Yeah, so we do money dates and we are very intentional about the time that we spend together looking at our income and our expenses. And we do it at the either at the very end of the month or at the very beginning, sometime around the first of the month, where we're reconciling the last month, which sounds kind of big and scary to some people, but it just makes means we're looking at our actual numbers. Like what did we end up spending on groceries? What did we end up spending on, gas and on fun stuff too? And then projections for the upcoming month. So for me, I like to know like, okay, this is probably what we're bringing in. This is probably what we're going to spend. And then I track a little bit throughout the month and just see like, are we on the same goal? Right. And then we have a mid-month date where we might need to do some adjustments if we sold a lot of stuff and all of a sudden we have more income. Okay, what do we want to do with that? Or if there was a bigger expense that we weren't expecting, my kid had to go to the doctor, or we had a car repair, something like that. How do we need to reallocate some of the categories of our money so we can make sure that it's falling into place? And so I actually built out an entire spending planner. It's called the Intentional Spending Planner. It's available on
Oh,
Etsy for under $10. Super easy, just to like plug in the numbers and then that's what I use that in my house because I wanted something that was really simplistic. I didn't want 100 categories for filling things. It's like very much just like cut and dry. This is what you do. And all the percentages kind of fall into place. And I think it makes it so simple. And our money dates are they're relatively quick now at this point. Like I said, we kind of have a bigger, like if there's more money coming in or more money going out, like maybe we'll sit down and have like a really you know, bigger date or a longer date about it. But otherwise, it's pretty quick and easy, like 20 minutes. What do we think? Does this look good to you? Yep. And because we've built that habit, we've built that muscle and now it's pretty free flowing in our house, which is nice.
yeah. And this is something that like very recent, maybe like the past 3 or 4 months that me and my husband started doing, like having kind of like first we said it would be weekly, but we don't really do it weekly. It's more like monthly, like when the salary comes in. But like it does, I feel like it's true what you said that money can actually it doesn't have to be divisive. It can unify, and then you know you're on the same page and you're working towards the same goal. So it's really true.
Yeah, what other way to connect with your partner than to know that you guys are on the same ship, sailing in the same direction, going to the same destinations along the way? Like that feels so good versus like you're over here buying random, tools or whatever, right? And I'm over here buying random teapots and stuff. Like that sucks. Like we want to be on the same, and not that you can't buy the things that you want. I actually believe in intentional spending and spending shame free on the things that like really bring you joy, but what a more fun way to like live your life and be in your partnership to like I said, be on the same boat, sailing the same direction. Like it's so much more fun.
And you mentioned that a lot of, well, I find that it's maybe more women than men that say, like, they just self-proclaim, like, I'm bad with money. Do you have a lot of clients like that? And how do you help women overcome that limiting belief? And where do you think it stems from? Like, is it just, you think it's societal or is it from the family?
Really good question. I think kind of both. I think we know that growing up, girls are taught about money differently than boys. More often than not, boys are taught about how important it is to bring money in, have a significant income. Maybe they are taught a little bit more about investing, things of that nature. Women, on the other hand, are taught that they need to be generous with their money. It needs to be some sort of servitude that they're doing. They need to save, scrimp and save, right? And so women come to me and say, I'm bad with money, but they're spending like, again, $8 mindlessly here, $20 mindlessly there. Men, on the other hand, and this is a very big generalization, but often I see men but spending on a much larger scale than women are. And so we kind of need to bring both parties back down to earth and say, okay, what do we actually need to look at here, right? Do you need a $100,000 truck that you're driving around? Often those truck payments are the ones that are a big demise to getting, hitting other financial goals, things of that nature. So it's just really about it's very unique for each couple, each person even. And so knowing, again, I do it in three parts. Essentially, we start with goals, like I just said with the couples. Even if you're not in a partnership, I think it's really important for you to understand what your own individual goals are. Then we go back and we talk about money story. So where did you grow up? How did you grow up around money? What habits are you bringing into the relationship? What did you want to do differently than your parents? What did your parents do well that you want to, emulate? And then we get into the numbers and we start looking like how are things shaping up for you? Is money just kind of slipping away with not a whole lot of intention and purpose behind that? But I think women specifically coming to me saying like, oh, I'm just not good with money. I mean, we know that women for a long time were told like, you're just not as good at math or at science or whatever,
Yeah.
like, those types of fields. And we know that's not true. And
And the
what I
heavy
often,
marketing to consume, like all the
yes.
dollars that, like, you need to look like this and you need this perfume and this makeup and these shoes.
Oh my gosh. Is that a real topic? For sure. We are marketed to way more often. And interestingly, women are usually what I like to call the CFO of the household, right?
Yep.
Like maybe the guy is bringing the money in. That often is still the case. But the women are the ones spending there. We're going to the grocery store and buying all the groceries. We're
Yeah,
getting all the stuff for the kids. So
exactly.
like we can't be bad with money. We simply can't because we need to know what we're doing. And like I said, often women then are told like, well, you just need to spend less. And there's like a disconnect on like, but all I'm buying is the groceries and the stuff for the kids. Like I haven't even bought myself a new bra in 3 years, something
Right.
like that. And meanwhile, there's like bigger things happening behind the scenes. And so it's not necessarily that like the men are bad with money, but the way they're approaching it is much different. And I think often, again, this is a huge generalization, but more often than not in a heterosexual relationship, the man is very logical, very analytical, very like, tell me the numbers and that's all I need. And women are far more emotional. We make money or we make decisions with our money based on like, oh, I want my kid to feel happy. And so I'm going to go buy this thing for my kid, or I want to be thoughtful for my husband. And so I want to get him his favorite meal that I know he loves when I make that, or whatever. And those are very traditional roles, but for better, for worse, that's often what I see. And so um, I think that's totally okay. It's just a matter of like, again, bringing those parties together and saying like, what is the most important thing? And when we get into it, we often find that women are not bad with money or not nearly as bad with money as they think they are. They just need a little help and education around it.
Yeah, and I've heard a terrible story about like a woman. She trusted, like, she trusted, it was just a given. She was a stay-at-home mom. Her husband was the main breadwinner. And it turns out like he had no clue. He wasn't keeping tabs of any of the spending or anything. And she had no clue what was going on with the finances.
Yeah.
And then they found like they were like gonna file bankruptcy and foreclosure and all these things. And so she like said, okay, we need to sit down and with a financial advisor. And like she became like the one that was like, they were doing it together, but she became so involved with the finances. So she ended up finding out that she was good with money. She always just kind of like said, oh, my husband deals with that. She didn't even get into it. So yeah, it's like sometimes you have to step up, get educated, and then you realize, oh, you don't suck with money. You just weren't, involved.
Yeah.
But they
Well,
ended
and
up,
actually,
it took
that's
some
one of the
work,
most
but they're okay now.
totally. And that's what I often see is, in fact, the man has been mismanaging the money, and kind of unbeknownst to the woman. And so we have to like recalibrate that a little bit. And again, this is not every single couple that comes to me by any means, but often I do see that women have just kind of defaulted like, oh, once we got married, he just took over. And for him, in his defense, like it wasn't like he received a ton of education in school, just as,
Right.
we didn't, or he didn't receive education in his household or whatever. And so he's doing the best he can with what he knows. I think the difference is the ego sometimes comes in and he's like, well, wait, I'm not good at being told that I'm not good with money.
Right.
So there's some like things to deconstruct there sometimes, not always, but and women are far more amiable, I would say, or amicable to learning about it. And then once we do, we're like off to the races. And there's actually a lot of research to support that, like when women are educated around money, we actually do very well with
Yeah,
it.
I've heard that before. They
Mhm.
said that like it was some article too that's saying like we're not bad at with money. Is when we're educated and we like really get into it, then yeah,
Yeah.
just like everything we can.
Yeah.
But
We can take the reins and we can run, man. Yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah,
good. Mhm.
and this new term, well, at least it's new to me. Like just this last year, the term like financial infidelity. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So financial infidelity is a really, really hard thing to go through. And it's essentially when one partner is either bringing in more money than they're letting on to their partner, or they're spending recklessly and not telling their partner. I often see, well, not often, but when I do see financial infidelity, this is more often than not a partner has like opened up a line of credit or a credit card, not telling their partner. And so then they're spending, on this credit card, and their partner is really oblivious to it. It's a really delicate conversation. It is really, really difficult to endure. But I think one of the things that we need to be aware of is if you're already not talking about money in your partnership, and then one person is, making these poor financial decisions, like where is the line from straight out lying and lying by omission and then simply we
Yeah.
never talk about it, so how did I know that I wasn't supposed to open a credit card up and go buy stuff on it? Like that feels a little bit, there's some like hard lines of like, okay, that feels icky, that feels wrong. But
Yeah,
I
because sometimes it doesn't happen. Like I'm thinking about like the example I gave with the couple I know. I don't even think it was malicious. It
yeah.
was just like I think it was more like he just was never taught how to be, financially savvy. So, but so when financial fidelity is when it's like with malicious intent, right? Like when there's being
Yeah.
sneaky about it.
Yeah, there's a little bit more intentionality behind it. And so I think, and but some people have come and said like, oh, my partner was spending money, without telling me. And I was like, well, were you talking about what your money was looking like beforehand? And they were like, well, no. I was like, okay. So, so it's not one person was bad or in the wrong or whatever. But yes, to your point, if there was like malicious intent, then that is 100% far easier to say like, yes, this was definitely something that was out of bounds, out of line, and to rebuild that trust, because just as like, regular infidelity, it really breaks down somebody's trust. Just, I mean, doing that with money is just as traumatic.
Yeah, at first I thought that sounded very loaded, financial infidelity. But then when I thought about it, like that can be, like you said, like some people have their homes on the line and, they have children and everything. So I could see how that can break your partner's trust, just like if they committed infidelity, like it is breaking trust, infidelity.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really, really hard thing to go through. And I think that with any financial trauma, right? And whether that was experienced in your childhood or in your adolescence or beyond, like it's really difficult to go through those financial traumas, and it's again not something that people are talking about. So hopefully we're here today changing that a little bit.
Yeah, speaking of, because you did mention in the beginning that we like kind of form our financial patterns and habits around 7 to 9. So what are some things that us moms can do to make sure that we cultivate, healthy spenders, healthy relationship with money, within our kids?
Yes. So you can't really teach anything that you yourself are not educated on, right?
Mhm.
It's just like with how you show up parenting. Like, are you spanking your kid or are you not? Like, if you don't know not to, then maybe that's hopefully not what you're doing, but maybe that's what you're doing, right? So I think the very first and foremost thing that you need to do is educate you yourself around money so that you can actually transfer those skills to your kids, right? I also often hear that money was one of those topics when people were growing up that was like kids were not supposed, like maybe you were protecting your kids from not talking to them about money or not talking with your spouse about money in front of your kids, but that's actually doing them a really big disservice. And not that they need to be involved in every single conversation, but I often will, if I happen to get a chance to go to the grocery store by myself, um and I might come home and say like, "Oh yeah, I spent $100 at the store today," right? They don't maybe know what that means or have context around it because my babies are little. They're almost 2 and 4. Um, but just having that language and knowing like, oh yeah, mommy goes to the grocery store and she spends money and she tells daddy about it. And that's what that looks like, right? I also have started doing allowance with my 4-year-old. She just started on her fourth birthday. And so there's kind of a lot of controversy around whether or not kids, deserve to get allowance or if they're just doing family chores or whatever. And so I think it's a good way to teach money, is all I will say about it. I think, of course, there's things that she should do that are just, a part of being our family. But then there's also specific things that we have a little chore chart for her. And if I notice that she's sharing really nicely with her brother, great. She gets $1 for that week. Even though that's the expectation, anyway. But we
Yeah, but
have
it's a way to
four.
introduce, currency, money, exchange value. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
to each
and
their own. Like, it's so much criticism about every aspect of parenting. Like, I don't think
everything.
yeah.
Yes, it's true. And we have a little balance on there of like, I think emotional intelligence is just as important as intellectual intelligence, right? And same in the workplace, you can't just be good at your job. You have to be good with the people at your job
Right.
as well, right? So that's why we did like sharing. We have, if you pick up your books, if you put things in your hamper, and I don't even know what the other one is, but every week on Wednesday, she gets $4 if, she did her chores throughout the week. And then we have a little structure thingy built that she puts money in a savings bin, in a spending bin, investing, and a give. And $1 goes to each. And so then, she just saved up enough money where she gets to buy a doll. And so mommy took her to this mall and she got to pay with her very own dollars for her doll. And so I think just having a really basic conversation with her about like, this is how money works. And then she said, well, next time we go to the store, I want to get another doll. And I said, okay, do you have $7 or do we need to wait a little bit? And so introducing a little bit of that delayed gratification and some
Yeah.
of those things, right? And having a healthy balance of here's how we save, here's how we spend, these are our goals associated with both. And just opening up that dialogue with them is a really good place to start with kids.
Yeah, I like those categories too, like to spend, give, invest. But how would she invest? Like, how would an example of a 4-year-old investing? What would she invest in?
So we have a 529 college savings plan open for her. And so she's already investing in that for her college. And so she's just contributing to her investment. And then we do a
Cool.
match with her. So it's a little tricky because obviously the digital age. So she right now has like tangible bills. But every few couple months or so, we will go to the bank. She'll deposit that money. And then I show her on my computer, this is what you have in your own savings account. She can read her name and stuff, so she sees like Kinsley's savings and then what the number is, and then Kinsley's investing, account, whatever. And then she sees what the number is. So whether or not that's totally like landing with her is still kind of up for debate,
Yeah, but it's
but it's an
introducing.
introduction.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I don't I think it's healthy too, because to like talk about money with your kids no matter how young they are, because I feel like my parents didn't, all I heard was like that we didn't have money for this, we didn't have money for that, and that's such like puts you in a scarcity mindset. Like, I understand, like, we're 4 kids, they were doing the best they could, like, middle class, whatever, but I never heard like, so with my son, I like don't want him to hear things like that, and he's only 2.5, but he understands that if you want to buy something, you need you need money. Or
Yeah.
like, yeah, or he like when we go visit, family members and he gets money. So he says, I'm rich, even if it's just like a coin. He'll say, I'm rich. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, put that out there. You're rich. But
I
yeah,
love
like,
that
but the
though.
fact that he like, he collects his little money and coins, and he knows that when we go to the store, he likes to give the money to the cashier. But so I'm not a professional, so I don't know like well, if that's good or not. But I'm like, at least like we try to cultivate like positivity around money. Like, it's just an exchange. You want something, you have to give money in return, and that's how money works. He understands that, when daddy goes to work, it's to get money, and we need money to buy things. So,
No,
very
that's
basic level.
wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
but he's 2.5, and then you
Yeah.
you can grow with him and learn and
Yeah.
lean
And I
into
like
that.
this, the pillars that you have. That's really cool. We'll try to implement that later.
Yeah. And even if you just have envelopes, it doesn't have to be like a really cool, fancy thing, it can just simply say those four words on the envelopes. And then, it's fun because we're coming up at the time of this recording on the holidays. So, like, she's going to have her
Yes.
little person that she chooses, and she has almost $20 saved to give to somebody. So she
Oh,
gets to go and buy toys for kids and give them. And so I hope to, yeah, instill some of that with them. And I think to your earlier point about we heard that all the time as kids, right? Money doesn't grow on trees, or we can't afford that. And the reality is in our household, we actually can afford the $7 doll that she's asking for when I go to Target with her. We can afford it, but I don't want to buy that. And I don't want to get in the trap
right.
of
Each
having to
time.
buy
Yeah.
her something every time we're there. And so instead, we use the language of we're just not prioritizing that today. We maybe a different day. And what that does is let her know that like we're in control of the money, like she herself, me, myself, right? And if she's like, well, what are we prioritizing? Then we can refer back to the goals that my husband and I have talked about collectively or during a family meeting, which we hold sometimes, of like, oh, well, we're really working towards, that trip to Portugal that we want to save for. And so we're going to save our money for that trip. And that's our priority right now. And then she gets to understand, like, oh, okay, so $1 does one thing. It can't go to the doll and to Portugal. So right now we're choosing Portugal, but sometimes we will choose that doll, or sometimes we will choose whatever it is that's kind of right in front of us. So she just gets to have some of that language that's a little bit more empowering for, I mean, both of them. But yeah, like I said, 1-year-old doesn't really know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And you mentioned the holidays, and I think this is like a perfect opportunity to talk because I feel like the holidays is when people like all of a sudden they realize, oh crap, it's the holidays, we need to buy presents. And it's like the end of the year, so they're like going into debt to buy presents. Could you give the audience tips about managing holiday spending, and is it worth even like spending so much money?
I think so many people, parents want to make the holidays magical. That's the goal, right? Is we want this like really fun, amazing Christmas or whatever a holiday for our kids, and that's so understandable. What I think happens is one, the marketing efforts behind these big, huge corporations are crazy, and so we get suckered into spending all this money on our kids. And the reality is kids would far rather have your time, have your attention than they would have this like a million presents. And actually, there's so much research to say that too many presents can be overwhelming to kids. I mean, we've all seen it where you're like, okay, on to the next one, on to the next one. And they're meanwhile on their second present, it's like they're the happiest, just
Yeah.
like playing with this new toy. And that's all they want to play with. They don't care about the rest of the 18 presents sitting under the tree. And
Yeah, they
so
want to have their moment with the the present that they're opening. Yeah.
yes, and they're super happy to do so, right? And so I love the idea of sticking to something you want, something you need, something to wear, something to read. Again, especially with little kids, it's perfect. Like four presents feels like plenty. My daughter is obsessed with like princess, nightgowns right now, so she's elated to have something like that. But I think you can make it so much more simple than just buying stuff to buy stuff. Again, it's putting that intentionality back into your money, right? And so some people see that and they're like, oh my God, that is the lamest Christmas ever. And I'm like, okay, it works for us, right? So you have to figure out what's going to work in your household. But I can tell you what's not going to work in my household is going into debt to make a magical Christmas, because all that would do as a parent is stress me out. And we know when you are financially stressed, it bleeds into your physical health, your emotional health, your relational health. All of these things are impacted when you have that undercurrent of financial stress, and your kids absorb that. They feel that. So for me, it's just not worth it to go into debt for these things, because ultimately, I think you're actually doing yourself and your family a disservice by like placing that stress kind of on your family, right?
Yeah.
And what I would say is, I know this is going to sound kind of like, whoa, but a lot of people, when they start doing money work, they get bogged down in like the every line item, like day to day, like we got to look over all this stuff. And actually, I would encourage people to zoom out a little bit and look at like your overall annual spending. Like, what is that going to look like for you? And I can tell you, I already know what we are going to be spending on our kids in 2025 Christmas because we we do that. We look at like our year ahead and we do our projections and we say, okay, well, this is how we're going to build up to that. And then come the holidays, I don't have this stress of, well, like, how am I
Yeah.
going to all of a
Doesn't
sudden
surprise
spend?
you all, all of
No,
a
it's
sudden.
coming every
Yeah,
year as long as I
exactly. At
can
the
remember
same
it's
time.
come.
Right.
Yeah. So just preparing a little bit, I think can make a world of difference. And so, now is really the time to do that. At the beginning of the year is a really good time to say like, okay, this is my year to get my finances in order. How's that going to look? How am I going to do that? Right.
Yeah. And I love that, like, the kids care about more about the memories and, that you don't need to overwhelm them. And I had a Melina, she's a professional organizer. Melina, I had her a few episodes ago, and she was also talking about how, like, as a professional organizer, she'll like tell people, don't buy a whole set of decorations again from this Christmas. Look in your cabinet, use the decorations from last year. And then she was like, also, you can use things that are free, like you can or very affordable, like some scented candles, and you can use different throws, or like she said, like put on holiday music with like Christmassy backgrounds and holiday backgrounds on the television. So she's not in finances, but just as an organizer, she was just talking about how much money people spend on like decorations, and that's like an expense that could go somewhere more meaningful or somewhere that's more important than spending like hundreds of dollars on Christmas lights and things like that.
Totally. Yes. And the intersectionality between some of that stuff to me is also what's so fascinating. I just had a conversation with a girlfriend who was saying, like sustainability efforts are really important to her. So buying from brands that are more expensive, but that will last way longer. And I
Mm,
think like we could, that's a whole thing talking about fast fashion and how
yeah.
that's really a problem for, I mean, the earth, but also your finances, right? And the intersectionality between all of that is so fascinating to me. So, but it goes again back to like your goals. Like what are the things that you value and care about and how can your money really show up for that, right? And I tell people this, show me your calendar and show me your bank statements and I will show you what your priorities are. Because if
Hmm.
you're out here telling me like, "Oh, vacations with my family are so important to me," but you haven't taken a vacation with your family in 5 years, how important is it? Right?
Right. Yeah. Something's got to give.
Totally. Yes. And then, so what really are your priorities? And when I say that and people think about, oh my God, what is on my calendar and what have I been spending money on? They're like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. And I'm like, don't be embarrassed, right? We are a shame-free zone here. But I think getting back into alignment is so helpful with how you actually want to, show up with your money, how you want to spend it, how you want to save it. All of these things are really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. Well, now we'll make a shift towards your momhood. You're a mompreneur and you have two kids, right? So how
Yep.
do you navigate motherhood with your business, and like what does that look like for you in a day to day?
Yes, for a long time, it was I was waking up early, doing my business in the mornings, doing it nap times, doing it at nighttime and on the weekends, when we had the time to do so, which was a lot, but I also like love my business so much and I love what I'm doing. And so it made it a little easier to like want to be in my business doing it. But actually just 2 months ago, we retired my husband. So he is officially out of the corporate grind. Yes. And he actually gets to be home with the babies. And yeah. Yeah. So really, I mean, he was literally working so much that there was plenty of days in the week that he didn't even get to see the kids ever. And so that was one of the things we said is like one of our goals is to spend time together as a family and how can we get there? And so we are very happy and proud to say that we've gotten there. He got to leave and just be home with the babies for a while. And now I work part-time and it works really well for us. So I have
Yeah, I
a little
love
bit
it.
more time on my hands to be in the business and to be with the babies for anything that comes up. Yeah.
Wow. And I always like to ask the moms here about what is it about anything you do. Self-care can sound kind of like cliche nowadays, but anything you do that fills up your cup, because I feel like that's something that it's so easy for us to neglect. And just to inspire the
Yes.
moms to take a moment from their life, and because if mom's not happy, then that'll reflect on the whole household. So what do you do?
100%. Yes. I am all about, right? Like the three currencies to me are energy, time, and money. And I think all are equally important. For me, filling up my cup is I'm a huge extrovert. It's being with other people, being with my friends, being with my husband, doing things out and about in the world. I love it. And so I very much prioritize time with my girlfriends on the calendar. And so we are intentional about, if we have brunch coming up, wonderful. Then before we leave that brunch, we already have the next date or two on the calendar. And
Oh,
like this
great.
year,
So you don't
yeah,
have any,
yeah.
because that's like the problem with like, it takes us 6 months to get on the same page.
Totally. And once you leave, it's so hard to actually find time where everyone's available and then doing a text exchange and figure like it's horrible. So we just have it on the calendar. And we did 2 girls trips this year, just like weekends away. And we've done that, even before my husband was around and available to hang with the kids as much as he is now. We were really intentional about either making sure the grandparents were around, or I've hired, the babysitter. This is your permission slip. Hire the babysitter, and do the thing that you need to do, whether that's a date night with your husband or with your girlfriends, or just solo time to get out of the house and do something that you enjoy, with yourself. Do it, because I mean, I preach about financial self-care. That's the name of my podcast, Financial Self-Care, because I think, it's about taking care of yourself by taking care of your money. And I think knowing, again, what your priorities are, and mine are definitely being with my girlfriends. That is my self-care. And I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Love it. Wow, this was such a great episode. And I would love for you to tell everyone where they can connect with you, work with you, listen to your podcast, or anything else that you have.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah. So I am financial therapist Lindsey on Instagram. I hang out there all the time. So you can, message me there. My website is copingwithlindsey.com, and I have a whole financial therapy page. So if you want to read up more about it, I believe in full price transparency. So everything that you would need to know is on that page. But if you have questions, certainly come and find me on Instagram. You can email me, whatever works. And I always do free 15-minute consultations. So you're not committing to anything, but if you want to just chat through like what financial therapy might look like for you, schedule the consultation. It can be you or you and your partner, whatever it looks like. And then my podcast is Financial Self-Care with Financial Therapist Lindsey, and that's available wherever you like to listen. So there I am.
Love it. Thank you so much, Lindsey. This was a lot of fun and it was very insightful. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
good. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad we made it happen.
I know, honestly.
Bye.
Bye.
A lot of busy moms put their health on the back burner, and I know because I was one of them. There I was, a nutritionist who preached health and wellness before I had my baby, and then I had my son, and my world was flipped upside down. And during the first 6 months postpartum, the idea of just like working out and eating healthy and all of it, my whole life before just seemed like a distant dream. But as cliche as it sounds, it's so true when they say you can't pour from an empty cup. I remember one day it just dawned on me. I was just like, man, like I matter. I need to take care of myself. Like if I'm not well, then, it's going to reflect on everything. So I just decided, like in baby steps, just like I would work with my clients, I had to apply this to myself, start practicing what I preach. First of all, giving myself grace. Asking for help is a big one, and just starting creating healthy routines. Which brings me to my gift to you today. If any of that describes you, or maybe it doesn't, but you just want to prevent that overwhelm, burnout, then I highly encourage you to head over to my website. I'll have the link in the show notes, and sign up for my free 8-week Mom Wellness Simplified Roadmap. Once a week, you'll receive a small wellness habit straight to your inbox designed specifically for busy moms. Each new habit will help you make a small but meaningful step towards reclaiming your vitality. So by the end of it, you'll have 8 easy to implement habits that fit seamlessly into your routine. Again, everything is tailored to fit into a hectic schedule because I believe that prioritizing your health shouldn't cause you more stress. I'm a full-time stay-at-home mom running a business on the side, so I make sure everything is achievable. And I know it'll be valuable to any mom out there who needs a bit of a restart, and it's free. So you can enroll now. The link will be in the show notes, and I'll see you there.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it, get it. And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it.